In a world where every transaction, every word, and every secret is digitized, a unique breed of criminals thrives. They don't break down doors. They slip into systems. Their weapon isn't a knife, but a keyboard. These are stories of digital ghosts, geniuses, and anarchists who dared to challenge corporations and governments only to pay the price with their freedom. In the neon-lit underworld of cybercrime, Max Butler was a king. Known by his handle Iceman, he was a brilliant and driven security consultant by day. But by night, he was one of the most prolific and influential carders on the planet. Butler didn't just steal data. He built an empire. He created a digital marketplace called Carter's Market, a one-stop shop for cybercriminals to buy and sell stolen credit card numbers, fake identities, and hacking tools. He was an entrepreneur of fraud. His innovation was to merge competing criminal forums, consolidating his power and creating a superstore for illegal data. He was meticulous, trusted, and utterly ruthless. His personal haul was immense. He compromised countless point-of-sale systems and is believed to have stolen nearly 2 million credit card numbers himself, causing at least $86 million in fraudulent losses. He lived a life of paranoia and contradiction, working as a legitimate security consultant while simultaneously orchestrating a massive criminal enterprise. The FBI's investigation, Operation Open Market, slowly closed the net around him. They saw not just a hacker, but the architect of a sprawling criminal network. In 2010, his reign as the Iceman ended when he was sentenced to 13 years in federal prison, one of the longest sentences for hacking in U.S. history. Max Butler turned trust into a business model for crime, creating a community built on shared deceit. When a mind capable of building secure systems chooses instead to engineer their collapse for profit, can we ever truly separate the protector from the predator? Albert Gonzalez was a man living a spectacular lie. To the United States Secret Service, he was a brilliant, if eccentric, informant, helping them hunt down cybercriminals across the globe. But in the shadows, he was Cagney, Supnazi, and JFMB0, the mastermind behind one of the most audacious and financially devastating data heists in history. Between 2005 and 2007, Gonzalez orchestrated a scheme of breathtaking scale, a silent digital blitzkrieg on the servers of major retailers like TJX Companies, Barnes & Noble, and Heartland Payment Systems. His weapon was a sophisticated technique called war driving, where he would patrol commercial areas, hunting for vulnerable Wi-Fi networks. Once inside, his team would install sniffers that siphoned credit and debit card numbers like a digital vampire. The haul was staggering. More than 170 million card numbers sold to criminal syndicates worldwide for pennies on the dollar, inflicting hundreds of millions in damages. His motivation was not ideology or curiosity. It was pure, unadulterated greed. While working with federal agents, he was celebrating his 28th birthday with a $75,000 party and complaining to his co-conspirators about the tedious task of counting his millions in cash by hand. This was a profound betrayal of trust, a chilling example of a poacher not just guarding the henhouse, but building a global network to burn it down. In 2010, his double life collapsed, and he was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. When the guardian becomes the predator, where do we turn for safety in a world where our financial lives are just lines of code waiting to be stolen? The crime committed by Edward Majorczyk was not aimed at corporations or governments. It was deeply and disturbingly personal. In 2014, he became one of the key figures in the infamous Celebgate scandal, a shocking violation of privacy that targeted dozens of celebrities, mostly women. Majorczyk wasn't a sophisticated coder who could dismantle corporate firewalls. His method was simpler, yet insidiously effective: phishing. He sent out mass emails meticulously designed to look like official security alerts from Apple and Google, duping his victims into revealing their usernames and passwords. With these keys, he unlocked a treasure trove of the most intimate and private moments of their lives, personal photographs and videos stored on their iCloud accounts. He wasn't a mastermind of a vast financial conspiracy. His motive was voyeuristic and invasive. He never sold or publicly shared the images himself, but his actions were part of a wider scheme that led to the images being leaked online, causing immense personal trauma and public humiliation for the victims. This was a crime that demonstrated how trust in everyday technology could be turned into a weapon of violation. In 2016, he pleaded guilty to unauthorized access to a protected computer and was sentenced to 9 months in federal prison. The case was a stark and horrifying illustration of a new kind of vulnerability in the digital age. If the cloud where we store our most private memories can be so easily broken into, is any part of our personal lives truly safe anymore? Matthew Wegman's crimes were a unique and terrifying form of psychological warfare committed by a teenage prodigy who happened to be legally blind. From his bedroom in Massachusetts, Wegman, along with a network of accomplices, manipulated the telephone system, the technological backbone of our society, with a mastery that baffled phone companies and law enforcement alike. He was a master of social engineering and technical exploitation. But his goal wasn't money. It was power and control, wielded through terror. He was a pioneer of swatting, the practice of making false emergency calls to send heavily armed police teams to an unsuspecting victim's home. He targeted his personal enemies, telecommunications employees, and random strangers, turning their lives into a nightmare. In one case, he convinced a Verizon employee that there was a major network outage and had her reroute phone traffic, allowing him to listen in on private calls. He orchestrated bomb threats and tormented his victims with his seemingly omniscient control over their phone lines. He was a digital puppet master, pulling strings of chaos from the safety of his home. His blindness was no impediment. He used screen reading software to navigate complex systems, his disability perhaps sharpening his other senses and his ability to manipulate people with his voice. In 2009, at the age of 19, the teenage terror was sentenced as an adult to 11 years in federal prison. Wegman weaponized the trust we have in our emergency services and communication networks. When a voice on the phone can unleash armed police on your home, who can you trust, and how can you feel safe? Kim Schmitz, the larger-than-life figure better known as Kim.com, wasn't a traditional hacker who broke into systems, but a digital mogul who bent the rules of the internet to his will, creating a platform that made him fabulously wealthy. The German-born entrepreneur was the founder of Mega Upload, a file-sharing site that, at its peak, accounted for an astonishing 4% of all internet traffic. It was a haven for users to store and share large files, but U.S. authorities claimed its primary purpose was mass copyright infringement. They alleged that Megapload facilitated the piracy of movies, music, and software on an industrial scale, costing copyright holders over $500 million in lost revenue while generating over $175 million for .com and his associates. In 2012, the story took a cinematic turn. In a dramatic pre-dawn raid coordinated with U.S. authorities, New Zealand police stormed his lavish mansion, arresting him and seizing his fleet of luxury cars. He was held in custody in connection with the U.S. indictment, beginning a years-long, high-stakes legal battle over his extradition to the United States to face charges of racketeering and money laundering. His case ignited a fierce global debate about internet freedom, privacy, and the aggressive reach of U.S. copyright law. .com presents himself as a champion of a free internet, a victim of corporate persecution. The U.S. government sees him as the kingpin of a massive criminal conspiracy. When innovation creates a tool that can be used for both legitimate purposes and mass illegality, who bears the ultimate responsibility? The creator or the user? Adrian Lamo was the homeless hacker, a complex and nomadic figure who lived out of a backpack and conducted his exploits from coffee shops and libraries. In the early 2000s, he became famous for a series of high-profile, ethically ambiguous intrusions. Lamo was a gray hat hacker, someone who breaks into computer systems without permission, but not for personal gain. often to expose security flaws. He infiltrated the internal networks of the New York Times, Microsoft, and Yahoo, not to steal or damage, but to explore. In the case of the New York Times, he even added his own name to their database of expert sources. He would then notify the companies of their vulnerabilities. He saw himself as a public servant performing a kind of digital security audit. But the law saw him as a trespasser. In 2004, after a lengthy investigation, he was arrested for the New York Times hack and sentenced to 6 months of home detention and 2 years of probation. However, his story took a much darker and more controversial turn years later when he became an informant. It was Lamo who reported Chelsea Manning to the authorities after Manning confided in him about leaking hundreds of thousands of classified government documents to WikiLeaks. This act made him a hero to some and a pariah to others, forever cementing his legacy as a man who lived in the gray areas of morality. When someone breaks down your door, not to rob you, but to show you the lock is broken, are they a criminal or a savior? Jeremy Hammond saw himself as a digital revolutionary, a soldier in a war for information freedom. Operating under the banner of the hacktivist collective Anonymous, he targeted those he viewed as corrupt and powerful, using his formidable coding skills as a weapon of political protest. His most significant act was the 2011 breach of Stratfor, a private global intelligence firm often called the Shadow CIA. Hammond saw Stratfor as a symbol of corporate and government overreach, profiting from secrets. In a daring and destructive hack, he stole over 5 million internal emails, along with credit card information from the company's clients, which included major corporations and government agencies like the Department of Defense. He didn't just steal the data, he released it, handing it over to WikiLeaks, which published the emails, causing a global firestorm and immense embarrassment for the firm and its clients. For Hammond, the motive was purely ideological, a belief that information wants to be free, and that the crimes of the powerful should be exposed by any means necessary. He used the stolen credit cards to make over $700,000 in donations to non-profit organizations. But the law does not distinguish between a thief and a revolutionary. The FBI, guided by an informant within Hammond's own circle, tracked him down. He was charged under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and, in 2013, was sentenced to the maximum of 10 years in prison. Hammond believed he was a freedom fighter, but the court saw him as a criminal who caused chaos and violated the privacy of thousands. Where is the line between activism and anarchy when the battlefield is the digital world itself? Ryan Collins was the other face of the 2014 Celebgate scandal, a man whose quiet life in Pennsylvania masked a dark digital obsession. Like Edward Majerchik, Collins employed a meticulously planned phishing scheme over a period of nearly 2 years, targeting the personal accounts of over 100 people, the majority of whom were Hollywood celebrities. He sent emails that appeared to be from Apple or Google, tricking his victims into giving up the keys to their digital kingdoms. Once inside their iCloud and Gmail accounts, he didn't just look, he stole. Collins illegally downloaded entire digital lives, including private photographs and videos, many of a deeply intimate nature. While authorities found no evidence that Collins himself leaked the images online, his actions were a critical part of the chain that led to their public dissemination and the subsequent global scandal. His motive was not financial gain, but a compulsive and illegal quest for access, a desire to possess the private moments of others. He treated people's lives as a collection to be acquired. In 2016, he was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison for his role in the conspiracy. The judge in his case noted the profound emotional distress and trauma he inflicted upon his victims. His actions, and the scandal they fueled, served as a brutal wake-up call about the fragility of digital privacy. When our most intimate moments are stored as data, what is the true cost of a single, stolen password? Kevin Mitnick, a name that became synonymous with the word hacker in the late 20th century, was a phantom in the machine, a man more comfortable in the virtual world than in the real one. In the 1980s and 90s, a time of digital innocence, Mitnick was a master of social engineering. He didn't just break code, he broke into the human mind, convincing employees to hand over passwords and secrets with a disarming charm that masked a relentless obsession. His playground was the burgeoning network of corporate America. He slipped through the digital defenses of giants like Digital Equipment Corporation, Nokia, and Motorola, not always for profit, but for the thrill of the chase, the ultimate intellectual conquest. He copied proprietary software, intercepted private emails, and cloned cell phones, treating the entire telecommunications network as his personal puzzle box. The FBI's pursuit of him became the stuff of legend, a 2.5-year manhunt for a man who could manipulate the very systems they used to track him. When he was finally captured in 1995, the prosecution painted him as a digital terrorist capable of starting a nuclear war by whistling into a payphone, a claim that, while hyperbolic, captured the public's fear of this new, invisible threat. Sentenced to 5 years in prison, Mitnick's case was a watershed moment. It forced society to confront the dark side of connectivity. He was a product of his time, a curious mind in a world of unlocked doors. But when does insatiable curiosity become a criminal obsession, turning a digital explorer into a trespasser who violates the trust upon which our connected world is built? Before he became a respected cybersecurity journalist, Kevin Poulsen was known to the FBI as Dark Dante, a digital rogue with a flair for the dramatic. In the early 1990s, Poulsen's exploits blurred the line between audacious prank and serious federal crime. His most famous hack was a display of pure, calculated arrogance. He seized control of all the phone lines for the Los Angeles radio station KIIS-FM, ensuring he would be the 102nd caller to win a brand new Porsche. But his ambitions went far beyond luxury cars. Poulsen's real danger lay in his infiltration of federal systems. He broke into an FBI database and accessed files related to wiretaps on foreign consulates, political figures, and even organized crime. This was no longer a game, it was espionage. He was a ghost in the government's machine, and for 17 months he was a fugitive, his face appearing on the show Unsolved Mysteries. His capture was almost poetic. The show's phone lines crashed during the broadcast about him, a calling card many attributed to Poulsen himself, though he was apprehended shortly after. Convicted in 1994, he was sentenced to 51 months in prison, at the time the longest sentence ever given for hacking. Poulsen's story is a chilling reminder that the same skills used for a seemingly harmless prank can be turned against the very institutions meant to protect society. How do we measure the intent of a phantom who can win a sports car one day and steal state secrets the next? Known to the world as Sabu, Hector Xavier Monsegur was the charismatic, profane, and highly visible leader of Lulzsec, an offshoot of Anonymous that embarked on a 50-day reign of digital terror in 2011. Lulzsec, short for Lulz Security, operated for the lulz, for the sheer, anarchic fun of it. They were theatrical, taunting their victims publicly on Twitter as they breached the systems of Sony Pictures, PBS, the CIA, and Fox News. Sabu was their figurehead, a folk hero to some, a menace to others. He projected an image of untouchable bravado from his virtual pulpit. But behind the screen was a 28-year-old unemployed father from New York's Lower East Side, living in public housing. And he had a secret. In June of 2011, the FBI found him. Cornered and facing decades in prison, away from his 2 adopted children, Sabu made a choice that would brand him a traitor in the hacking community forever. He became an FBI informant. For the next 10 months, he lived a double life, leading his Lulzsec comrades deeper into their operations while feeding every piece of information to his FBI handlers. His cooperation led to the arrests of the core members of his own group, a shocking betrayal of trust that dismantled one of the world's most notorious hacking collectives from the inside. Due to his extraordinary cooperation, his sentence was drastically reduced. In 2014, he walked free after only 7 months served. Sabu's story is a dark fable of loyalty and betrayal in the digital age. When a leader becomes an instrument of the state, what happens to the trust that binds a rebellion together? Roman Seleznev, the son of a prominent Russian politician, operated under the online moniker Track2, and he was a pioneer in the industrialization of cybercrime. He was not a hacktivist or a prankster. He was a cold, calculating businessman whose product was stolen financial data. For over a decade, he masterminded a massive international scheme, hacking into thousands of retail point-of-sale systems across the United States. His malware silently scraped data from every credit card swiped at compromised businesses, from small pizzerias in Washington to restaurants in Idaho. He then bundled this data, millions of credit card numbers, and sold it on shadowy online marketplaces he helped popularize, feeding a global ecosystem of fraud. The U.S. Secret Service estimated that his operations caused at least $169 million in losses. The hunt for Seleznev was a top priority for international law enforcement. He was finally captured in 2014 in the Maldives, an arrest that Russia deemed an illegal kidnapping. During his trial, prosecutors revealed the staggering scale of his empire, describing him as a titan of the cybercrime world. He showed no remorse, viewing his victims not as people, but as abstract sources of revenue. In 2017, he received a sentence that sent shockwaves through the cybercrime community. 27 years in federal prison, one of the harshest sentences ever handed down for hacking. His case highlights the global cat-and-mouse game between law enforcement and cybercriminals who operate across borders. When crime becomes a global digital enterprise, what does justice look like? These cases forced law enforcement and corporations to evolve, but the arms race between defenders and hackers never stops. We entrust our data to the cloud, our money to digital banks, our secrets to messaging apps. But can we trust those who hold the keys to this digital kingdom? The unanswered question looms large. How do we, as a society, build trust in those tasked with protecting us in this digital maze? And how do we balance security with freedom, so the shadow of distrust doesn't eclipse the light of progress? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you faced the consequences of cybercrime? What do you think could prevent these stories in the future? Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, support the channel with a like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay updated on new investigations.